Chairmen.
Hello.
It's another beautiful day in Tone Town, although on my side of Tone Town right now, there are just steady amounts of what they're calling atmospheric rivers.
In Tone Town.
Well,
on the way.
Since we're all in the proverbial Tone Town.
What am I talking about? We're on the way.
We're all on the way, and as you said, you're in your Mazda Miata, but you opted for an automatic, not a stick
Oh,
shift.
did I?
Oh, that's a good idea.
What have I been shifting this whole time?
You just have a spring-loaded clutch, which goes to
my
nothing.
transmission just blew. Yeah.
Yeah, talk about endangered species, man. Stick shift. I don't think my kid will know what that is. It'll be gone.
It's unfortunate.
Same.
But with that said, with that important news out of the way, we have even more important news today, which is we are delivering to you the best guitar cables of 2023. Or are they?
Ooh.
Our friends over at Guitar Player Magazine have done a publication about what they consider to be the best guitar cables of 2023, and they call them hard-working cables that will preserve your tone. So these cables are hard workers, which is something that I always say in my top 3 things that I look at for cables. Hard workers is 1.
Yep.
Tone is 2. And reliability is 3. So we're going to see where we align with our friends over at Guitar Players and our Guitar Player Magazine, and I'll remind you all that we had done a similar sort of analysis or comparison of maybe where some of our opinions lie versus Guitar Player Magazine. I believe it was Guitar Player Magazine with their power supply choices of 2023. And some of the viewership and listenership accused Guitar Player of using AI to write the article because of the quality of the recommendations were seemingly 10 years old. And that the technology of the power supplies had improved considerably from from 10 years ago to now, and the article seemed to not reflect those changes in evolution in power supplies. So hopefully that's not the case. It appears that the author is a different author, and we're going to see whether we agree or not. Now, I'll say as a couple of sides before we get into it, is that these are not patch cables. So these are the instrument cables that go from the guitar into the pedalboard or from the pedalboard to the amp. These are not the interconnections on the pedalboard. There would be different recommendations that we would make for that. And we've got other episodes about cables where we talk about that more specifically. And if you want to go over to the Vertex YouTube channel, we also talk more specifically about those and have shootouts, etc. And maybe we'll have a future episode where we talk about it in more depth. But for the purposes of this article and the analysis, it is only about what I call the input cable, which is the guitar into the pedalboard, and the output cable going out of the pedalboard to the amplifier. These are typically thicker, more robust cables because they're getting a lot more use and abuse than something that's sedentary on the pedalboard and is generally not manipulated. So that's the first caveat. The second thing that I want to say that's unrelated to cables is that if you are enjoying the content that you're hearing and seeing from us, the best way to help us is to write us a review on iTunes. Now, you can give us any amount of stars that you want. Of course, we prefer the maximum amount of stars, but we would love to have a review from you. Tell us what you think. And the best way to support us, and it's a free way to support us, is write us that review. So we appreciate that, and we thank you in advance. And let's get right into the article. I'm going to share my screen, and let's take a look. So here we are. Can you all see this clearly, gentlemen? If you're a watcher on YouTube, hopefully you can see this as well. And you can see right away the best guitar cables of 2023, hard-working cables that will preserve your tone. This is written by Matt McCracken. And this was kind of right at the turn of the new year, so it's a couple months old, but presumably all these cables are still available, and that there haven't been significant developments in new cables on the market since then. So make sure your guitar's tone stays pure and unfiltered with our pick of the best guitar cables. Now, I'm not going to go through and read sort of the preamble here. He kind of just gives a little bit of a I don't know, sort of an editorialized position about, the importance of choosing a good cable. And we'll just get right to his very first recommendation. So number 1 on the list, he recommends the Mogami Gold Series guitar cable. Now, my understanding of this is that it is the 2524. Mogami, when you buy it from them directly, they have some sort of like gold, platinum, silver. And it changes, I think, the plug that it comes with, and it changes maybe the cable also. I believe that the Mogami Gold, I'm 99% sure, is 2524.
I think you're correct.
And, they give the capacitance rating here, which I think is something to be considered. This is in meters, so, hypothetically, you divide it by 3 if you wanted feet. But I have to say, comparatively to the power supply article, as a number 1, I there is some subjectivity in cables, of course. I think this is actually a pretty good start. What do you guys say?
Yeah, I mean, I own all Mogami cabling. I mean, a wire up on Mogami, and all my instrument cables are Mogami. So I would say for a number 1 that they've already, kind of started it off pretty well.
I would agree. I think it's similarly that, Mogami 2319, which is their patch cable, and 2314 is kind of like an industry standard. I would say this is kind of an industry standard instrument lead as well. Like it's not surprising that it's on this list. Possibly that it's in the first position. I'm not sure, but yeah, I love it. Thank you. This is a great start to the article. I hope it's only up from here.
Yeah, this is a good cable. And 2524 has been around for a long time. I feel like, obviously there were people that popularized this as individual players, but I feel like Robert Bradshaw was one of the first people to really get on the Mogami train and really introduce it more to professional guitar players. This is what a lot of his racks were built with once Mogami was really, available in the United States. A lot of the early rig builders could only use Belden because that was a USA made cable, whereas Mogami is made in Japan. And, these have become pretty ubiquitous in the marketplace. And I think, Mogami is expensive if you buy the one that says Mogami on it. You can probably make this cable for $20, depending on what kind of quality connector you use. Switchcraft is also totally acceptable if you wanted to have that as an alternative, but you can buy 2524 in bulk for under $1 a foot, I think.
Yep.
So, if you wanted to get this cable and you didn't want to spend the big money to have it in a package that says Mogami, but you wanted ostensibly the exact same cable, you could always buy the bulk 2524. We have videos on our YouTube channel that show explicitly how to make this cable using actual Mogami 2524, I believe. And one thing I'll just say, they give some reasons to buy and stuff like that. I think we're going to just omit that for now because I feel like some of these are aesthetic and have nothing to do with anything. But reasons to avoid, they say if you don't like gold, you'll notice on the Mogami cable they use a Neutrik connector, which is a very high quality connector, and they use the gold plated ones. And I think a lot of people will pay or willing to pay the upcharge to get ones that are chrome or nickel plated versus gold, and they believe that the gold is a quieter, better conductivity. It would be false to believe that you're going to somehow have a better tone. It's not like the whole thing is made out of gold. It's just a plating over the outside. Otherwise, the materials of the plug are exactly the same. I wouldn't spend the extra money if you're going to go and buy plugs and make it yourself to get the ones that have gold ends. I would just get the standard silver. There's not going to be an appreciable difference, if any difference whatsoever. Again, this is not like it's made out of solid gold like a wedding ring. This is made out of a plating, which is made to look gold. I actually don't think that there's any gold in it at all. So it's just sort of, lipstick on a pig. So
nice pig.
Anyway, I think overall we agree with this position, or as a possibility. I think this is a defensible number one choice, whereas The power supply one was brutal. But let's look at number 2. This is the Fender Professional Series guitar cable. Now, it doesn't look as though they give any specifications as to the capacitance. That's not the only thing to be concerned about. But they don't give any specs there. They talk about its great value. They talk about its variety of lengths as reasons to buy, although I would presume that every cable has varieties of lengths. Reasons to avoid, not much color choice. If you want to personalize your cable and express yourself through the color of your input and output cable, you can't do that with this. And plated connectors. Well, I mean, the gold ones are plated as well. So I don't agree exactly with the reason to avoid. It looks like these are Switchcraft connectors from what I can tell, and they have Fender heat shrink over them. Do you have any specific issues with this recommendation here? Fender Professional Series cable. I mean, it seems like quite a drop. I'm just trying to see if we can maybe get a little bit.
Yeah. Does it say what the cable or anything? Is it their designed cable?
I would presume. It's funny, when I was trying to click off of this, it keeps going, in posting the link, it keeps going to something that says Dirty Angel.
Yeah, it says that Gibson new single, Dirty Angel. I can
that's what it is. I was going to say, it doesn't sound...
I was like, oh man, did we just get hit with the porn virus or something like that? Dirty Angel.
Yeah, with this cable, I've never used one. I mean, I can tell you my very uneducated first impression is that I probably wouldn't be going to Fender if I want to get a high quality cable. I would probably be going to Fender if I want a cable that'll work for a good price. But I'm not going there being like, oh man, Fender cables. It's the twin reverb of the cable world is not what's going through my head as much. I'm thinking mass produced, low cost.
I'm gonna go see if we have any on our cable wall. So give me a second.
Yeah. Oh, I'm looking here at Sweetwater, which generally has the best. They generally have the best descriptions. There's really no information about the cable itself, the capacitance, anything like that. So I would predict that, like a lot of guitar brands and amplifier brands and companies that are not necessarily cable makers but offer a cable that's branded for them, they probably have somebody doing sort of OEM cable stuff for them, which is kind of using like a house brand and then rebranding it as Fender. And that's a pretty common thing. There's a company in upstate New York, which is kind of like the primary one that most companies in the U.S. use if they're having it made domestically. And I forget the acronym. There's it's like 3 letters or something like that are an abbreviation for something like, ABC cables or something like that. It's not that, but it's something like that. And I know that they do a lot of the big brands, and I would predict that it's some version of that with Fender, and it could be made overseas. And I'm sure that it's just designed to be affordable. I would say that this would never in any way compare with Mogami as far as like the quality, the sound, the reliability. I believe these are Switchcraft connectors. They look like Switchcraft connectors. They may not be. They may be kind of knockoffs, because it's very common that you'll see a lot of knockoff Switchcraft connectors. But if they are Switchcraft, at least the connection will be decent. As far as the sound of the cable, I think that will be variable.
Is it? I can't tell from the picture. Is it a tech flexed cable or is it bare?
It looks like it's actually it's braided, and so it'll be thicker than a tech flex.
Yeah,
because the tech flex is usually a little more sheer.
Yeah,
tech flex is like the Lululemon yoga pants.
One thing I will say for people that haven't used tech flex before, we used to do instrument cables, and we used Mogami. In the early days, we used Neutrik, and then we switched over to G&H plugs. But one of the complaints I got when we did tech flex or a braided cable, this is a total side. This is free for everyone listening here. They are very slippery on a polished stage or a stage that isn't carpeted. So tech flex can be good, and it can also be frustrating depending on your use case. But Yeah, something to be aware
Very
of.
slippery.
Yeah, I think also it can sometimes make the cable look shabby prematurely, because if you catch, like a little
pilly sweater,
you can get kind of a run in it, like a nylon or something like that, and it can start to look kind of bad. So, most of these cables have great, outers, whether it's PVC or whatever it is that they choose to use for the material, and I just say, let the cable be freeborn.
Freeborn, beautiful.
Yeah. Keep your cables in the nude. No tech flex.
What a picture. Okay, can I stop you guys and interrupt and tell you about a couple of our sponsors for today? I wanted to interject on the nude cable analogy early and go with a couple of our sponsors, if that's all right. And that is, the first one I want to tell you guys about is the Guitar Sanctuary. I think it's safe to say it's one of all of our favorite music stores in America. Brian loves it so much that he is there right now.
Yeah.
Every episode that we have been doing with Chairmen, Brian just shows up at the Guitar Sanctuary. It's almost like he works there. So Brian is at the Guitar Sanctuary right now. They carry Vertex, Goodwood audio, just about every pedal we talk about on this show you can find at the Guitar Sanctuary. Right before this episode, the three of us were chatting about a new amp and cab sim that's come out, and Brian's like, oh yeah, we're getting them in. They're on the way. Like, they get all of the new stuff there. Definitely worth checking out. They have a website online, as most companies do these days, and if you want to get your pedalboard set up, since Brian's always there anyways, he has a bench and he can set up your rig for you at the Guitar Sanctuary. Great place to check out. Love them, and thank you for sponsoring the show, everyone at the Guitar Sanctuary. Also wanted to tell you guys about BTPA, or Bestronix. They carry all of the accessories, bulk cable like we're chatting about today, if you wanted to make your own instrument leads and plugs and ends. Anything you need for your pedalboard accessory-wise, they are there to help, and they have what you need. So ask for Brad at the BTPA, Bestronix. BTPA.com is the website, and you can use the code DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS, to get 10% off your order at BTPA.com.
Yep.
Those are the sponsors that I wanted to tell you guys about. Let's should we get back into it?
Let's get back into it. Yeah, shout out Big Brad.
Big Brad.
I feel like the guys that always have like names like Big or Tiny before their name are like the opposite, because Brad's not a big guy.
Yep. Why do people call me Handsome Grant? Should I be looking into that?
That's accurate, though. That's accurate.
Yeah, if when Grant's riding his bike in Vancouver, Canada, people are just floored. They stop in traffic.
Traffic jams everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yep.
He can't go anywhere.
That's because the nude cable I have on my back.
Yeah, there's a lot of nude cabling going on up there in Canada. We can say that for sure.
Vancouver.
All right. So we've talked about the professional series guitar cable. Let's see what they got for the third spot. Ernie Ball braided guitar cable. Firstly, I don't recognize what plugs these are. I would presume that these are some sort of cable or plug that they have made for themselves, because it doesn't seem to fully resemble anything that I recognize. It looks like the housing is pretty long comparatively to a Switchcraft, although has kind of a Switchcraft look. It doesn't seem to give any indication of the capacitance. So, and it looks like what they're banking on here is ultra reliable, tangle resistant.
There we go.
That's like water resistant for cable, and noise free design. So I guess that means that it's got good shielding.
I thought it meant your guitar signal will not pass. It's
no signal will pass through this cable. We guarantee it. So, I think that just like the Fender one, if you don't have a capacitance rating on your, this is the Dirty Angel thing. If you're looking at the YouTube, why are we getting this Dirty Angel thing? Man, what a name. Anyway, separately from the Dirty Angel, it's getting back to the capacitance thing, and I promise I'm gonna thread this needle here with Dirty Angel and capacitance.
I'm looking forward to it.
If they don't give you the capacitance specs, this is like a car manufacturer who is rooted in safety but refuses to publish their crash test results. If you are saying that you're making a high quality cable, generally you want to know what the electrical specifications are on that. And I'd say a good baseline, if you're not familiar with guitar cables for the purposes of the input and output cable, I would say a good starting place is somewhere between 30 to 40, let's just say 40 or lower picofarads per foot. There are some companies that have real low ones, like 20s. And more typically, they fall in kind of the 30 to 40 range. Like I think a Mogami is kind of like a 30 to mid 30s. And then there's some like the Gepco X band, which I doubt that they'll put in here because I actually don't think anybody makes a guitar cable with it. You'd have to like make it yourself. That's like in the 20s. I think maybe George L's in the 20s, but there's problems with those being solderless. But you could always solder them if you wanted a real low capacitance cable that was reliable. But when they don't say anything, this gives me pause because you have no idea what you're getting. You could be getting something here that's really going to sound dark with your rig because it's got so much capacitance. And also the plugs have a capacitance on top of that. So depending on which plug they use or if it's a plug you've never heard of, like you don't know how much capacitance the plug has. So you could be, some of these plugs that I've measured have as much capacitance as like 5 feet of cable. And then you have to multiply that by 2 because there's 2 plugs. So it's like, it could be like adding another 10 feet of cable to your already 10-foot cable, because the quality of the plugs varies drastically. So I don't know that I mean, I would say the Mogami 1 in number 1 position, I agree with. 2 and 3, these cables don't provide us any information. It's like a crapshoot. You're kind of gambling as to whether these even sound good.
But they're still rated 5 stars. So
according to who,
Exactly.
Yeah. I would also say the fact that this is reasons to avoid. Like, I feel like you don't want your cables to look good? ? Like, I don't care. Like, I want it to sound good. I don't understand their reason.
So they just don't like the look. They don't like the look of it. Limited cable lengths, 10 feet to 25 feet. What are the other one? 6 to 25 feet. Okay. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with this one, but let's move on. Let's move on to their number 4 position, which is the D'Addario Planet Waves American Stage Guitar Cable. Now, this is one that I've always said about this cable. It is the most underrated quality guitar cable out there. I was introduced to this cable through the great Robin Ford, who had a D'Addario endorsement. I think they just sent him some, and he loved the sound of this cable so much that he had me wire his entire pedal board using D'Addario Planet Waves American Stage Guitar Cable, where they ended up just sending us like 2 25-footers, and I just cut them down to use to make patch cables out of them. That he loved the sound of it so much. And I actually think that they sound really good. The plugs are made by Neutrik, kind of OEM for D'Addario, and they're a little bit different than a standard Neutrik plug. They're kind of more of like Neutrik does Switchcraft. They seem plenty reliable to me. I mean, the construction is very similar. I don't think it's not a Rian branded one, which is sort of like the Chinese kind of sister company of Neutrik, where they kind of make some lower end versions of their plugs. I really like this cable. I wouldn't recommend it for patch cables as Robin Ford did because they're just a little too thick. But it is a really high quality cable, and it is great sounding. And I think that I have no objections to this cable at all. In fact, I would say from a budget standpoint, this should actually be closer to the Mogami. Like, I would choose this over the Fender and Ernie Ball cable any day, and I think that they're all fairly closely priced. I would not get the silent plug versions of anything D'Addario, though. Those are really hard to work with, and they have like this kill switch on it where you never know if you left it on or not, and so you can have like a cable that works, but it seems like it's dead. I really love this cable. What do you guys think?
I've never used this one. I've used Planet Waves. Like, I grew up playing different type of cable than this. But as far as this particular cable, I have never actually used it. So
this is not your daddy's Planet Waves. This is totally different than
exactly,
the stuff
and
when
that's that's the impression I'm getting. And they've, as you can tell, they've posted capacitance as well, which is a bit lower than the Mogami at 92 per meter, I guess.
Yeah, so it's right around 30 per foot.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I mean, as far as the specs go, it looks pretty good, but I can't speak from personal experience, unfortunately. But I do I do also like that it at least from the picture doesn't look braided or tech flexed, which in my mind is not for myself as a pro.
It has a braided shield, but it's not braided on the outside. And then, of course, they've asphyxiated the cable as it's 22 gauge oxygen free. So there isn't that cable
breathing.
can't even breathe.
Nope. That's how good it is.
Yeah.
This will work in space. You just won't hear anything.
I have a couple of them here because we carry a lot of Deer products. I really liked it versus, I I have a mixture of different length Mogami cable and a Deer here. I couldn't find, a significant difference between the two. As in, when you plug in some cables and you're like, oh, yeah, no, that does not sound good. And you immediately unplug it and throw it in the garbage or cut off the ends or whatever. But between these, I think it's a great sounding cable. The connectors for me are a little bulky, kind of depends on the guitar you're playing or anything like that. But connectors aside, I think it's a great sounding cable.
It is a great cable. I think that if you're on a budget and you want a great cable, I think this is the one. This is the move. All right, 5. The Evidence Audio Lyric HG guitar cables.
I didn't think this would make the list.
Yeah, I thought this would be too high end, kind of given what we've seen.
They did label it as reasons to avoid. It's pricey.
Yeah. So, well, he also says stiff cable not great for pedalboards. Well, I don't think anybody would be using this on the physical pedalboard itself. And the reason that it's stiff is that it's got a solid core. And that's one of the things that they say are reasons to avoid. I will say this about this cable. I think that the Evidence cables are really well made. Unquestionably, these are high end for a reason. They are beautifully made cables. Most of them have some sort of braiding that's not like Tech Flex, but it's actual super dense woven braid around them. They've been used by guys like John Mayer and David Gilmour and really a lot of heavy hitters have used Evidence Audio over the years. And I think that they're great cables. I think they have a specific sound. It's not necessarily the sound that I go for because I feel like it does change some of the elements of sort of what I consider to be the most neutral, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. I think that there are tons of players that want what they provide, and I think that in terms of the build quality, they are in the top 5 that exist in our industry. So, you just have to be aware of what it is that you want out of your guitar cable, and if you want a super neutral sound or you want something that kind of exaggerates certain frequencies in a nice way that kind of give you a little bit more of something that you want. And I think that Evidence has several great cables, the Lyric being one of them. I think there's another one called the Melody. Is that one the blue one? There's another one that sort of looks like this, except instead of the green in the weave, it's blue, and that one also sounds really good. And they have another one called the Forte, which is really nice. All of them have a different sound, and they all sound nice. I think that they do publish a spec for capacitance, I believe, on this. I just don't think they put it in the article. And I remember it being quite low. I think the challenge with these is, they're stiff because they have a solid core as opposed to a stranded. But I think that this is a good cable. I'm surprised they put it on here just because of the price and sort of the quality compared to the other stuff that's on here. But I really like these cables. I would have no objection to anybody saying that they wanted to use them. What do you guys think?
I actually interviewed Tony. Must have been a couple of years now, and we talked specifically about capacitance. And he is not a believer in it being the one of the main metrics, as the industry has gathered around capacitance is the one thing that you look at as
I
far
agree
as
with that.
determining the quality of a cable. It's become, it's become an easy number to gravitate towards, rather than saying, how do you like the sound? How does it feel? How does it affect? How does it work with your guitar? So I think that was really enlightening for me to hear him talk about that. And he doesn't make a big deal about posting capacitance on his website, just because of that. But I use a lot of Evidence monorail for pedal boards as like an upgrade option, because it's solid core as well. But I'm a big fan. I made one of my cables, my instrument leads. I now can't remember the name of the cable, the specific cable from Evidence. It would have been 7-8 years ago now, and it has served me so well over the past 8 years. It's been, beaten to death and hasn't skipped a beat. It is not one of the solid core ones. It's one of the, everything in it is stranded and then kind of braided shield. So I can't speak specifically on the Lyric. I can speak to Evidence, and I've been really happy with the results. Mm-hmm. One of the things to know about using a solid core cable, you can see in the picture, is one side has a red kind of boot on it and the other doesn't, is they tend to be directional cables. So you kind of have to plug in the same side to your guitar every time, which is, a little quirk if you're not used to it. But other than that, I mean, I have no complaints on Evidence, and really love to support as well a smaller company rather than an absolute giant like Fender. I think it's really cool to be able to support, smaller guys in the States as well.
Yeah.
Right.
And I've actually never had any experience with their instrument cables. I've had plenty of people, ask for Evidence for patch cables and those kind of things, and I've seen a lot of people use them before. But I mean, from looking at the specs and seeing this type of instrument cable does come across a lot of people's, like, when they send in their boards to be done, if it's a soft case or whatever, I'll kind of get like the whole stack of like their instrument cables that are in like the pouches or stuff. And it's it's very common to see a lot of the Evidence instrument cables, like a good 50-50 between those and the Mogami stuff. So they are popular from seeing a lot of people using them. I personally just never even like, I'm just going to plug in that cable and see how it sounds. Like, I've just never, I just never had the time to, but I've always heard great things about Evidence. And now I'm kind of intrigued to go get one and, actually try it myself.
Yeah. Show me the evidence, right?
Right.
Well, and I have some disagreements about the directional nature, but we'll get back to that in just a moment. I wanted to talk about a couple of our sponsors that make our podcast possible every single week. The first of which are our friends over at Sweetwater, and they have an amazing, amazing app that they have recently launched called the Gear Exchange. And this is a place where you can sell and buy used items from other people just like you. And it rivals other companies like Reverb or eBay, or in some ways even Craigslist, where you have an option to buy and sell peer-to-peer. And they've set up a really, really brilliant system, which I think sort of is an amalgamation of all the best things that I love about Reverb without the things that I really dislike about Reverb. And one of the principal things that they've addressed are the issue with really high seller fees. And one thing that they've done in addition to making it much more affordable to sell on the Gear Exchange from Sweetwater is they have an option for you not to pay any fees at all as a seller. And one of the ways with which you can do that is that you can decide to put all of your earnings onto a Sweetwater gift card. And that is a great way to ensure that you're keeping everything that you've earned, and that you also have an option to buy new stuff. If you're somebody like me and you're always getting new stuff from Sweetwater all the time, this is an easy way to ensure that you're keeping all of your profits when you sell your gear used to another person, and being able to reuse the full amount without any fees deducted to go and get the new stuff that you'd be buying anyway. So I highly recommend checking out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange. Just go to sweetwater.com/used. You can create an account. I've already been buying and selling stuff on there, and I've had great experiences. Sweetwater is an absolutely amazing company, and I highly recommend that you check out their Gear Exchange to either buy something used that you've been considering or to sell something that you've been considering offloading. It's a great way to do that, so highly recommended. The second sponsor that I want to speak to you about today are our friends over at Stringjoy. Now, if you've been paying attention to any of the stuff that we've been doing on our YouTube channel, you can see that I have constantly been trying different strings because I have what's most likely the world's most corrosive sweat. I have tried all different sorts of remedies to try to adapt this, from changing diet to wiping down the guitar strings after every usage. It doesn't seem like there's anything that I can do that will really help me preserve my strings where I can use them more than a few hours without having to completely restring my strings. And I had been trying different coated strings and it had some success, but I have to say that the string that has not failed me yet and has done an amazing job at not only producing longevity for me, but also sounding great is the stuff from Stringjoy. And Stringjoy is great in that they are one of the only companies that I'm aware of in the string game that allows you to create a subscription service. And I use subscription services for all sorts of things like coffee. I never want to run out of coffee, so I make sure that I have a subscription service so it is always delivered to my door in a timely fashion so that I always know that I can reliably go to my cupboard and that I'll be able to make coffee. And in that very same way, I want to have strings that are always here, so I'm never going to string my guitars and I don't have to run to the Guitar Center or somewhere else and buy a string that's not exactly the one that I want, but I need strings and I have to make a compromise. No more compromises in that regard. You can have a string subscription service through Stringjoy and you can get the same amount of strings every single month delivered to your home, or you can just buy things a la carte just as you normally would. And Stringjoy is offering a special discount code for Chairman of the Boards listeners, 10% off using the coupon code BOARDS, BOARDS. Head over to stringjoy.com and you can cash in that coupon. I highly recommend that you do it. They have some great strings. They even are offering a new line of coated strings, which I'm really interested to try out. But absolutely amazing stuff, handmade in Nashville. Go check them out. All right, so let's go back to our guitar cables. Now, let's see, where did I go? Here we go. Here we go. It always takes me a minute to find my screen share.
The curse of Zoom.
So we talked briefly about directional cables, and I'll make this quick because I know that this is not what this is fully about, but there really isn't such thing as a directional guitar cable, no matter which doctor tells you that there are. And Miss Cleo was big on directional guitar cables. If any of you remember her, she was a kind of a telephone psychic, and she was from she said she was from the Caribbean. It turned out that she lived on Crenshaw in L.A. But she'd say, "Call me now," and she would read you your fortune. But I think that there's a certain amount of that when it comes to directional cables, and it's sort of predicated, at least even loosely, if you believe in it, in that you have a twisted pair shielded, which I don't think that this is. I think this is just a coaxial cable. And that you would float the ground on one side, and then the other side you would connect it to one of the center conductors on a twisted pair shield, like a mic cable. If it's coaxial, then there's just no way to do it, and there would be no determination as to which side of the solid core would be the right side to do it. It's just it's a little bit hocus pocus. But anyway, I have a video on it if people are curious about it, and I make a bunch of cables with different versions of the same cable. Some of them, wired directionally, the others not. And if you can tell the difference, then bless your heart. So 6, the Boss instrument cable. 24 karat gold plated contacts.
Yes.
So, I mean, is there like guys that are like smelting down these cables to try to like get some gold out of them?
Yep.
Oxygen free. So they've these cables can't breathe either. It says they're good value. These appear to be braided. I think it's one of these things on these where it's like, they're using a Boss branded plug. I'm sure that they're like okay, but I think that this falls into the same category as like the Fender and the Ernie Ball. Like, there's no specification for capacitance. They're braided. I'm sure that they're reliable. They have a lifetime warranty. Most cables these days have that. I'm sure that it's probably sounds okay. I've actually never played it, so I can't speak to it. But the general consensus on, you know, kind of these like pedal branded or like companies that are not specifically cable maker branded, it's sort of just like they're shooting for a specific market of just kind of low hanging fruit. And it's not like they've spent, you know, years and years developing this guitar cable that's like the industry standard. Like this is not that. Any remarks on this?
I mean, yeah. So I would just go to say, I've before I started doing this, I think I was somewhere buying. I was trying to buy an amp online or something, and I was like, "Oh, I'm already on the website, so I might as well just look at instrument cables or look at these things because it's convenient. I don't want to buy it from somewhere else." And I got those cables and they were super cheap and everything. And when I was talking to customer service, I was, trying to return them because they stopped working, all these things. I'm like, oh yeah, these are just a generic cable that we offer. And I was like, well, why? What's the reason? And they could never give me a reason. So I think a big group of these bigger brands, not saying that they're trying to just put out, I think it's more convenient. It's a convenience factor for Boss and for Fender to have instrument cables on their site for people to buy if they're buying their amp or buying their switch or those kind of things. But like the fact that like it doesn't have a lot of the specs where some of these other better brands have the gauge and they tell you the capacitance, like those kind of things, when you can get more details out of something you're buying, it's a better buy. If there's less details, then it's always just a toss up of what you're going to get without like especially because it looks like there's some kind of material. I can't really tell.
It's got a braided material, sort of like how the Fender one was and the Ernie Ball one was.
So it's hard to tell like what the kind of cable is underneath without ripping it apart. But then by that
I'm
point,
sure it's a similar thing where it's like it's like a house brand for like whoever's the contract manufacturer.
Correct.
I think that the company I remember I was saying it's like some company up in like upstate New York. I think it's called like IEWC or IWC or something like that. They make a bunch of these types of cables for other brands. And it's like a house brand. It's just like inexpensive, and it's not like it's bad. It's just sort of like it's like unsweetened, unsalted oatmeal. It's the oatmeal that you would get at a convalescent home.
It'll fill your tummy, but not much else.
Maybe if it's a convalescent home, it'll empty your tummy.
I think it is interesting that they flash at the top under specifications that it's made with 24 karat gold plated contacts, and at the bottom you might want to get something more premium as the downside. Like there's the marketing side of this cable. Let's make sure we can use the wording 24 karat gold, but then like that, it kind of stops there. There's no capacitance. There's no this, that, or the other thing. And it's definitely a lower end as far as cost goes. It's a lower end cable. So I think
they don't put the cost on any of these, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's zero. I think it's
I could imagine it's $15, $10 to $15 if you for that cable.
We'll view on Amazon.
Good old Amazon.
I'm
going for 12. I'm guessing $12.
So it's funny. They're linking to patch cables, 1 foot, 3 foot. So this isn't even like a realistic.
Interesting.
These are like patch cables. So I think they actually linked to the wrong.
Is it underneath? Underneath is a fender, isn't that right there?
Yeah, underneath is a fender. So actually, they don't show the actual. That's weird.
And the right angles.
Weird. Well, let's move on to 7, which is from our old friend George L. A
Mr.
customizable option. Yeah. George L. Well, I'll say this about George L. It has a sound that's very specific. It's very low capacitance, and it was probably one of the first real low capacitance cables out there. As far as guitar cables are concerned, separately from the solderless stuff. Now, the solderless, as we know, is bogus, and nobody should really be using solderless today. There's just no reason to. There's enough resources to understand how to solder. If you really like the sound of George L cables, like guys like Eric Johnson do, just solder it. it takes what would be a unreliable connection long term and now makes it a reliable one. As far as the sound of it, I think for like a clean Strat, they actually sound really nice. They tend to be real bright, and they have plenty of nice chime for that sort of thing. I found that in higher gain situations, they can get a little peaky. I don't really like that about them, but I think for clean stuff like Fender guitars, Fender amps, they can be really beautiful for that, and you just solder them and that's it. I think as far as adding them to this list, I mean, connection-wise, so far this is the worst in terms of the quality of the connector. Because anytime you're solderless, you basically need to be doing the sign of the cross before every gig because you don't know if you're going to be, if you're going to be getting in trouble with the quality of the connection because you're just relying on a set screw that is holding the entire thing together. And that is risky.
The fact that, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The fact that there's heat shrink on it too just shows that like if something goes wrong, you have to pull back that.
Oh no, this is like a rubber. This is sort of like a rubber.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a rubberized prophylactic that goes around the plug.
Oh,
yeah, so
okay. I take that back. I was
Yeah.
gonna say you'd end up ruining that heat shrink just so you can make sure the connection is solid. But from here, the screen's tiny, so I couldn't tell. Okay,
Sorry. Let me increase. Here we go. Check it out.
There we go.
I got
George
30-year-old eyes now, so I have like these old eyes. My daughter calls me old, so I'm like,
yeah. Well,
okay, I see the rubber. Okay, I see it. Interesting.
Brandon, any commentary about our friend George?
I think my experience has been similar with the sound of the cable, which I think is, we might bring this up more at the end of the podcast, but I think probably more something I pay attention to more than I do the capacitance is just getting a feel for how the cable sounds. And George L's I've always found to be quite bright, like you mentioned, and I'm not a huge fan of that. So for me, it's not my favorite choice. But I know a lot of guys, they really want that, and they want that sound to come through. So I think if that's what you're after, I think a huge takeaway from today is picking the cable for the sound that you want, because every cable you have, no matter their claims, is going to affect the sound of your guitar, your instrument, your rig. And so I think choosing the cable appropriately for that, especially from guitar to pedalboard, is something that's worth trying a few different options out and seeing what resonates with you, to use a great word for that.
Well, it seems that none of the links that they provided actually go to this cable. They just go to buying like plugs in bulk.
Yeah.
I don't think George L is very expensive for what it is. Like it's as expensive as almost anything on this, on any of the high end options. Like you could get the Mogami cable for the same price as this.
Crazy.
I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, I remember back in the day when I was 16 or whatever, and I would go to Guitar Center, and I remember I got 2 packs of George L's for 10 cables, but it was like $170 something.
Wow,
and I was
expensive.
Like, what?
Yeah.
That's only for 10 cables? And I had I had one of those like Loop Master 6 loop switchers, which was mechanical switches, so it wasn't even fancy. And so I needed 2 cables per, and I was just like, I'm going to have to buy a 3rd pack just to get one more set of cables, because we didn't have Amazon at the time. So we didn't have stuff to be able to just buy individual connect. It was just whatever Guitar Center had.
You're paying more for your cables than you are the switcher.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, at almost $250 or whatever for cabling, buying $250 worth of cabling now of connectors and cable, I would have 4 times the amount of stuff.
At least.
This one says it's we're on number 8 now. This is the Fender Deluxe series. It says it's the only cable for vintage Fender lovers.
Oh.
That's what I've been doing wrong all these years. I've always wondered, and now I know.
So this cable appears to be the exact same cable as what we had seen further up on the list.
Number 2.
In the number 2. It looks like it uses the same style connector. They just use gold tips, and then it's using a tweed colored braid instead of the black.
Ooh, nice and slippery.
I would predict that it is the exact same cable in here, and the deluxe component is the tweed and the brown coloration over the connectors with the gold tips. I would say it would be highly unlikely that this would be a actual different cable. And again, I think this is some sort of OEM thing that somebody is making for them, and then they can just provide different colorings based on, you know, the look that you want to go for. And if you want to match your favorite 50s Fender tweed style amplifier, I don't predict that this is any different than the black one. And again, the gold plated stuff, that is not going to improve your tone. I would just, honestly, if you thought that you just wanted something that sounded like a Fender cable, you might as well just get the black one, unless you really, really need the look of this one to complete the rig and just tie it all together. I don't think that there's going to be any difference in terms of what's inside of this cable. Any commentary on that?
I mean, I always say that my tone sounds better in tweed, and so I'd probably disregard everything you just said, Mason, and say that the tweed shielding does make a big difference. For those of you that aren't getting me, totally kidding. And yeah, I think it's just funny to me how you can have a Fender cable in position number 2 with 5 stars and the Fender Deluxe in position number 8 with 4.5, knowing that they are most likely going to be the exact same thing. It feels like they're pulling cables out of a hat for the position that they want to talk about next.
The interesting thing too is it doesn't seem to come in anything greater than 6 feet. Hey, Oakley.
And I just thought this. I saw the same thing. The link you clicked on was a 3-foot cable. Let's be honest. Like, who's using a 3-foot cable?
That's Oakley's cable, man. Oakley
really
uses a 3-footer.
It's just scale for Oakley. Here's some. Well, you know, they're not actually that cheap, because I mean, this is not the link they gave is the wrong. This is called black tweed. How could,
okay.
A darker tone.
Black tweed.
My gosh.
Yeah, so it looks like for a 10-footer, it's like, you know, $30 at Guitar Center for these. I would just say get the American stage cable, man. Don't even mess with this stuff. Right, Oakley? Don't even bother.
Ernie Ball.
9, Ernie Ball coiled guitar cable for the old
curious
school
if a coily
enthusiast.
Yeah, I was waiting for a coily.
So, I mean, here's the thing. I think that if you want a coil cable, you know, you have to love a lot of capacitance. It's basically, you know, like at least double what the normal length is. So if this is a 10-foot coil cable, it's basically like a 20-footer. The company that actually makes the best coil cable, in my opinion, that it has the coil element but doesn't have all the capacitance, is actually Bestronix. Our friend over at Brad, they made a coil cable that's actually really nice. And so if you want sort of the vintage vibe, you know, of you know, playing at Woodstock, they have one that actually can give you that without affecting the tone, unless you deliberately want the tone to be affected by the increased capacitance. Of course, you could always just get a longer cable and it would do the same thing. But I'm sure that the Ernie Ball one will suck the tone out just like any other coil cable would. It looks like their connectors are still kind of those weird, you know, whatever it is that they've manufactured that are a no-name brand, that aren't like Switchcraft or Neutrik or any of the nice ones. But I'm as I said before, I'm sure that it'll suck the tone out just as well as any other coil cable, right, Oakley?
I thought correct me if I'm wrong, I've never been into a coily cable before, so this is, you know, I'm going off of just what I've heard in the past, but I thought the whole point why you get a coily cable is because of more capacitance and a darker sound. If you have a really bright guitar or a really bright rig, you might consider a coily cable to kind of darken it up a little bit. Am I totally missing something here, or is that kind of the point?
I think also you know, before wirelesses and stuff like that, this is a good way to be able to, like, you know, create some space and kind of have like an accordion of your cable so that it didn't like coil up on the floor or get kind of screwed up. And so I think that they were also, I think stylistically is one thing, but I also think that I could see their merit if you're moving around a lot or, you know, pulling away from your rig and you kind of want to have some, you know, relief to the cable, and then want to be able to come back and have it sort of, you know, get back into its form. But yeah, Yeah, it's definitely you have to be into it in order to want it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would think maybe one of these could exist on a top 10 list. Arguably, I don't think most people are coil cable people except for Gearman Dude.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with like owning coily cables, but before I talk about how I feel about the coily cables, I do want to mention our last two sponsors real quick, which are Creation Music Company, all in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Speaking of cables, Creation has patch cables, plugs, bulk cabling, wiring, anchors. I use all their adhesive anchors, all the zip ties, or the sticky things that you attach cables to, what people call them, which is the most common question. They have all that kind of stuff there that you need to be able to DIY your own pedal board. They do have instrument cables, custom cables if you don't want to make splitter cables. They have a discount code for Chairmen 15. So it's the name Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, and then number 15 for 15% off almost all their products. It does exclude some of their custom boards and cases and their bulk plugs because the plugs are already at a discount. So I use them all the time. This board literally right next to me I can see all the light bulb plugs, right angles, pancakes, everything. So check them out, visit them, and support Creation as a company. The next would be Mono Creators, which I think we've all talked about how we all own multiple of their cases. I do not own one single. I own multiples of mono cases. So it'd be like a wet, dry, wet of mono cases if you were listening. But they are doing a discount for 10% off with the discount code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, for 15% off their website. Solid backpacks, DJ backpacks, studio backpacks, dual guitar cases for two electrics or acoustic electric or single cases. They even have pedal boards, and I think we've all built on them before. Really solid products, and amazing quality, and they're incredibly fast with shipping too. And I think over a certain spot, it's free shipping. Don't take me on that, but I'm pretty sure. But that's the last two of our sponsors that I wanted to chat about. But on the topic of coily cables, I don't have a lot of experience with coily cables except for that coily cable that I grew up with that was connected to our phone of our house.
Yes.
That would like wrap around my wrist when I was holding the phone when I was talking to the girl I really liked, who now I'm married to, so that works out great.
Coily cables. Coily
right?
cables get the girl.
Yeah, it creates romance when you least expect it.
Listen, 15 years later, and we're still together. So those coilies helped, or like the coilies and headphones. Those are about all I have experience. I've seen them back in like photos of like musicians using them, but it was so long ago. It's not a common thing that like we don't carry them here. There are certain ones that I see, and there is another coily cable. So I don't have a lot of experience with them. They look cool. I personally, I would feel like they would get tangled too easily. Like standard guitar cables get so tangled. I can't imagine pulling out, like imagine this headphone cable is the coily cable, but like them somehow intersected or whatever. And then you pull out a case and it just looks, I've stayed away from them for the exact reason. They could be great cables. I've just never wanted to attempt them.
You're not a coily guy.
I'm not. I mean, for the fact that I did land the girl, that's about all I care about when it comes to coily cables. So,
yep.
Coily boys. Well, they go on to number 10, which is the PRS Signature Series guitar cable. I believe this is also it's made by Van Damme. So Jean-Claude Van Damme, if you don't know,
yes.
He was an action star in the 1990s. I believe he's Belgian martial artist. He came out with his cable company, Van Damme Cables. And they've collaborated with PRS. And actually, I think the Van Damme stuff is, all kidding aside, is actually a high quality cable.
Yeah.
This one is using Neutrik ends. I think that those are fine ends. I would say that, this is, probably along the lines of the quality of what you would hear in a Mogami or an Evidence. I don't know what the price point of this is. It seems like all their links are kind of going to like weird stuff that's not quite the same. $38. That's actually not a bad price for Van Dam. So I would say this is. I actually don't understand why this isn't higher up. If you got the Tweed one, that was like 27 or something like that. So I would say this could, in my mind, could easily be up there with the Evidence or with the American Stage Cable. That's a pretty great deal for a Van Dam, because if you were just going to buy Van Dam on its own, it's pretty expensive.
And yeah. I think as far as companies that should be making cables, it makes sense for a guitar manufacturer to come up with a cable that works well with their guitar. Yeah. They know the specs of the pickups. They know, roughly the length of cable their customers are going to use. Not that, that's a given. Any guitar company, you go buy their cables. But in my mind, it's a good natural next step for a guitar company to come out with a well-manufactured cable that transmits their signals appropriately, So yeah, it's cool to see them at least using quality cable, well-recognized and reputable plugs. And so it's great. Again, though, I don't have experience with it. I'm the guy that sticks with a cable that I kind of like, and I don't really look too far outside of that. So I don't have personal experience on this one, but it looks like it should be, like you said, much, much higher up on the list.
Yeah, I would say, obviously, when I'm not podcasting at the Guitar Sanctuary and I'm just hanging out here, we do sell these on our cable wall. So we have Mogami, PRS. I think Whirlwind is like our third one. But of all of them, the Mogami and the PRS are definitely two of the top sellers, especially in the PRS market, since we do have a lot of PRS guitars. You'll see more people buying this signature cable with their PRSs because they trust that the company has designed the cable to work well with their guitar. I'm not saying that it only works well with that guitar or anything, but there's just I think people trust it more. And I've played through this cable and I think it sounds great too. I've never played it through in a live circumstance. It's always been through like an Iridium or something. But I do agree that it should be higher up on the list for where it's at. I think 10 is a little low. And I also, where it says might be too skinny for some, I don't think I've ever noticed it being too thin, where they say it could be.
Doesn't look or feel starved?
No, it actually feels like a really high quality cable. Like, it doesn't feel cheap. It feels like an appropriate size. It's not like 2314 Mogami, how thin those patch cables are. But yeah, it's definitely a decent size. It's thinner than those Fender wrapped cables, but I think it's a great cable.
Right. Well, and shout out to Jean-Claude.
Thanks, Sean.
If you want your tone to have a roundhouse kick to the face, this is the one.
Killer.
Right, Oakley? Yep. We're just waiting for Steven Seagal's cable now.
Right.
11 is the MXR Pro Series guitar cable, a high quality, low capacitance cable with which they do not share the capacitance from what I can see. It's just told. It's just known it's low capacitance.
Yep.
I would predict that this is the same exact thing where, like, that company that I was talking about that does a lot of OEM stuff, they're probably making this. This looks like it's using, some sort of, it kind of looks like a Switchcraft, but I don't think it is because I've seen these in person. I think it's one of those situations where it's kind of like again, like a cable that's made, or a plug that's made to look like a Switchcraft, but it's not. I think that they actually use plastic housings on these, even though they're wrapped in heat shrink. And I think it's probably somewhere between a budget cable and something that's decent. I don't know that it's the one that you would want to like spend a bunch of money on. I mean, man, that PRS cable was such a good deal. I feel like it's kind of unbeatable, either that or the stage cable. This is $30 for a 20-foot, and then how much was the PRS? For a 25
High
foot PRS
30s.
38, I'm getting the PRS or the American stage cable all day long over this. The PRS has the I don't know what happened to our images here, but anyway, I think the PRS one to me is just hands down the best deal. That the American stage cable, I don't think that we can go wrong on those fronts.
So what would be your top pick then, Mason? We had the Mogami at number 1. You talked about American Stage, PRS.
Yeah, I would say that just because I like the sound of the Mogami, I feel like it's the most neutral of those that I know of. I would probably go with that. It is a little bit more expensive. I would say that American Stage and the PRS are also great picks. And then there's a lot of great stuff that's actually not on here, that's not on the list at all. Like they show Providence cables as the title photo, but they never use them. Those are actually really nice cables as well. Providence has made some really nice cables. They are a pedal manufacturer company, but they, again, make really nice cables, high quality, lots of different versions of them. I think Pete Thorne still uses Providence cables to this day. Also, my friend Prashant Aswani, great guitar player. He's a Providence guy. I actually, my favorite cable that has ever been made is the Belden 9778. And I don't think you can, the only place that you can buy it from is if you buy what's called our input cable, and it's sold through Sweetwater exclusively. And it's using Belden 9778 cable, and that's my favorite cable of all time. It's a coaxial cable. I think it's the best sounding, most neutral. Doesn't have particularly low capacitance. It's kind of just a medium spec. It has a neoprene insulator, and it's a little bit different than what you would normally see from like the cables, like the Mogami. I think it's PVC. It's a great sounding cable, and they're not that expensive for what it is that they are. I think that's one of my favorites. Also, the Belden 8412 I really like. That's a mic cable. That's what Pete Cornish uses for the Pete Cornish cables. I really like those. And these are not super expensive cables either. Like if you bought the cable in bulk and made it yourself, you're probably paying roughly $1.50 or so a foot, plus whatever the connectors that you decide to use are. The Canary stuff is also really good. The GS4, GS6 is really nice sounding. Dumble was a big believer in the Canary cables. That's what he used for all of his amp testing, what he recommended to his players. Those are also really great. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go. And if you want to DIY it and experiment with some different cables, you can really save a bunch of money. I have a bunch of videos on how to solder and do that. I believe that you guys have some versions of videos on soldering techniques that people can check out if they're curious and they want to experiment. But what do you guys think? It's kind of final thoughts on this list, what your pick is, and maybe if there's something that's not on this list that you might recommend to people.
Yeah,
Brian,
I mean, I would say for my pick, I'm gonna stick with Mogami. I've always loved
Maurice Gami. Shout out
from this list. I would pick Mogami. My second pick would probably be. I'm not gonna say the second pick because I haven't officially tried the evidence stuff. I really want to.
What about stuff that's not on this list that you would recommend?
So like I have like my main cables, and I have some backups in case, and sometimes if people need to borrow them. I butchered this name episodes upon episodes ago where I called them cauliflower cables, but they're called Coalfield cables. I like the look, Mason. Looks great.
Good vibe.
And I like those cables. They are wrapped in a Tex Flex, so they are a little bit slippery. So I use them more for like board the amp sometimes. So those are like my backup types of cables. I am interested in trying some of those evidence cables. I keep wanting to say Eventide, but it's evidence. So those would be my picks. It really just comes down to like if you pick up a cable and if the connectors are like plastic, and I have done a couple of these before, picked them up, and like the long plug is plastic, it's not a good quality. Like you're just gonna run into some issues. So I mean, the last thing you want to do is invest in really cheap cables, because I saw a lot of those notes where it's cheap, like it's too expensive. But like, what is expensive? Like, is a $50 instrument cable as expensive as that $4,000 pedal board that you just put together for yourself, like between all your pedals, like, you know, what's
Or
up?
how expensive is it losing your shirt on stage, you know, getting caught with your pants down with a bad cable? How much is that worth?
Exactly. So it's just investing in, like, if you think about it, you're investing in the tires for your car at the Tone Town. There we go. The instrument cables are the pathway, the tires to getting you that tone that you need. Just got to round it out. So, and you don't want to get a flat, you know, while you're cruising down, listening to your favorite song with the windows down. So that's what I would just say. Yeah, never decide on something if it's cheap, because then you're always gonna like me, like we were looking for a car and it's like, oh well, this one is $10,000 cheaper. I'm like, but it has like 60,000 extra miles. So
and
like
retreads.
And retreads, like there's so many things that come involved with it. Like, oh, if I get something cheaper, I can get this. I'm like, yeah, but that's not always a good thing. Like, just like invest in the quality.
Yep.
If you're spending all that money on pedals, spend a decent amount on an instrument cable.
Yep. Nobody wants a $1 sushi buffet, or maybe they do, but
No.
but nobody, but everybody has regretted the $1 sushi buffet, or the $20 tattoo. These are just things that you don't want to go cheap on.
Yep. I like it. So what I'm hearing you guys say is, instead of buying my aftermarket exhaust for the Miata, maybe just make sure I've got some good tires on first. I don't like it. Yeah, but I'll do it.
Not spinners, just like offer.
Come on,
like,
man.
Get
taking
the
all the
warranty
wind out
on
of
the
my
tires.
sails.
Yeah.
No, that's good. So, I think I would also do the Mogami. Mogami 2524 for me is just home. Like, I've made so many of those cables. I know exactly how to make them. They're really nice to work with if you're going to make your own cables. The 2524 is awesome. And so for me, that would be probably my top pick. And from there, I don't have a ton of experience in this realm and across tons of different cable types. I've used Canary, I've used Mogami. I haven't used a Belden. I've used, the Evidence stuff, and there's some great options, but I've never been happy from buying a bargain bin cable at a music store, and I've always regretted that decision. It's always come back to bite me. So, making your own quality cable, I think, is probably one of the best things you can invest in.
Yeah. And any picks on here, Grant, that weren't on the list that you endorsed? You kind of mentioned Evidence earlier, but do you know what model it was that you liked?
It's not a woven cable. It was just a green jacket on the out, like a green rubber PVC outer jacket. And I wonder if it's
because there's a standard Lyric, there's the Forte.
Yeah, I can't remember it's been so long.
Yeah, okay.
But if you go on their website, it's the green. It's just the green. It's just a braided core or stranded core, sorry. And it's been perfect for me for 8 years or more.
Maybe somebody knows and they can chime in what Evidence comment. Cable it is. I think the bottom line here, though, amongst us, if you're going to go with a cable that's on that list, I think Mogami is definitely the move. I could also vouch for the American Stage cable. And the PRS one I haven't tried, but Van Dam I have tried, and so presumably it's all pretty high end at Van Dam, sort of like how it is at Mogami. Most of the models are all pretty good. It seems like they're using quality stuff with Neutrik, same with the Mogami, and then with the American Stage cable from Diodario, they have a Neutrik plug, but it's made for Diodario specifically, so I'm sure that's also good. But I think Mogami, aka Maurice Gami, which is I presume where the Mo is coming from, made in Japan. I think that's the winner. On this list. Again, I recommend trying to make some of your own patch cables. You can experiment with different stuff. I really like the Belden stuff, 9778, 8412, Canary GS6, GS4. Another one that's really good, Gapco X Band, is a really nice low capacitance one if you want to try that. All really good stuff. And I think like Marker Tech and places like that, you can buy bulk versions of all these cables. And also Performance Audio in Utah, I think you can also get pretty good deals on it too. So shop around there. I'll throw those links in the description as well if you're watching on YouTube. And gentlemen, thank you for coming with me on this journey. I think that this one I can confidently say from Guitar Player is better than the Power Supply one. I do think that there were some holes in it, undoubtedly. This is, again, why you really want somebody who is in the industry, that is versed well in cables, that's dealing with cables all the time, to write articles like this. But again, I would say it's at least better, and it seems like it's moving in the right direction comparatively. It seems like maybe there is still some connection to the links to try to sell more cables. The links kind of go to all sorts of different places that are not necessarily related to the product that's in question there, as far as the Amazon links and stuff like that. But nonetheless, it seems to at least be a step in the right direction, and hopefully we're able to point some people some quality cables. And again, I'll link some cables that we recommend and that we talked about separately, if they're not listed in this article, in the description on YouTube, so you can check it out there if you want to see about either buying some bulk cable or getting some of the ones that we think are particularly good of pre-made cables.
Love it.
All right. Until next time.
All right.
Thanks,
See you
guys.
guys.
See ya.